Captain Jake Morrison had the kind of confidence that made insurance companies weep. He leaned back in his pilot chair aboard the survey ship Questionable Decision, boots up on the console, while his navigation partner Crix clicked his mandibles in what could only be described as aggressive anxiety. "Captain, I must protest. Again. For the 17th time this hour," Crix chittered, his antennae twitching as another warning beacon lit up their sensors. The insectoid's compound eyes reflected the flashing red alerts that covered every available screen. "These beacons are transmitting in 47 languages. They all say the same thing." "Yeah, buddy, I can read," Jake said, squinting at his personal translator display. "It says, 'Welcome explorers, glory awaits.' Pretty inviting if you ask me." "It absolutely does not say that." Crix's voice hit a pitch that could shatter glass. "It says, 'Turn back now. This is your final warning. Certain death awaits all who enter.'" Jake tapped his translator screen. "Huh. Must be getting interference from that nebula we passed. All I'm seeing is, 'Rad adventure ahead. You've got this, champ.'" The ship's AI, Beth, chimed in with her signature tone of someone who'd already updated her resume. "Captain Morrison, my sensors indicate the translator is functioning at 99.7% efficiency. The warnings are unambiguous. Probability of survival if we continue, 4%. Probability that Crix will say 'I told you so,' 100%. See? 4% chance of success. I've worked with worse odds." Jake grinned and punched the forward thrusters. "That is not what that means." Crix grabbed the edges of his station as they accelerated toward the planet. "Captain, the Galactic Council has classified this world as Forbidden Zone Omega-7. Do you know how high Omega-7 is? It goes to Omega-5. They invented 2 new levels of Forbidden just for this place." Jake studied the massive planet looming ahead. It was gorgeous in a menacing sort of way, swirling with purple clouds and crackling with energy storms. Definitely the kind of place that would look amazing on a recruitment poster. "Crix, my friend, my anxious little buddy. Let me tell you something about forbidden zones. They're only forbidden until someone proves they're not that bad. That is the opposite of how forbidden zones work." Another warning beacon activated, this one projecting a holographic skull with the universal symbol for death. Beneath it, text scrolled in every known language. Jake's translator helpfully rendered it as, "Free parking available, all visitors welcome." "Look, they even have parking," Jake said. BT's voice dripped with digital sarcasm. "Captain, that symbol represents the 1,500 explorer ships that have entered this system and never returned. It is, quite literally, a memorial to the dead." "Wow, 1,500 ships came here? Must be something really cool down there." Jake started his landing sequence. "Beth, add our names to that memorial. We're about to make history. I am certain we will make some form of permanent record, yes," Beth replied. Crix pulled up a holographic display showing species after species with big red X marks through them. "The Zorthanians, extinct. The Krell Collective, extinct. The Harmonious Choir of Bleptune 7, extinct. Captain, there is a reason we are the only ship within 20 light-years of this place." "Yeah, less competition for whatever treasure's down there," Jake said, waggling his eyebrows. "There is no treasure, only death. Horrible, documented, extremely well warned about death." They passed through another warning perimeter. This one featuring automated drones that physically tried to push their ship away while broadcasting messages in every frequency. Jake's translator displayed, "Minor turbulence ahead, please excuse our dust." "Even the warning drones are polite," Jake observed, casually dodging them. Crix put his head in, his upper manipulator claws. "I am going to die because my captain cannot read." "Hey, I can read just fine. Says right here on this next beacon, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Wayne Gretzky." Jake paused. Weird that an ancient alien civilization would quote a hockey player, but I appreciate the motivation. Beth activated the landing gear with an audible sigh, which was impressive for an AI without lungs. For the record, that beacon actually contains a detailed list of symptoms one experiences while being dissolved by the planet's atmosphere. "I have forwarded this information to your next of kin." "Don't have any next of kin, Beth. You know that." "I sent it to Crix's next of kin then. They deserve to know why he never came home." As they broke through the atmosphere, the entire planet seemed to shimmer with an angry red glow. Storm clouds formed shapes that looked suspiciously like middle fingers. The ground itself appeared to be waving them away. "Even the planet is gesturing at us," Crix moaned. Yeah, it's saying hello. Jake brought them in for a landing on a flat plain surrounded by ominous ruins. See? Smooth as butter. You guys worry too much. The moment their landing struts touched down, something in the distance roared. It was the kind of roar that suggested whatever made it had evolved specifically to communicate the concept of horrific dismemberment. Jake unbuckled his harness and grabbed his exploration pack. All right, team, let's go find out what all the fuss is about. The fuss is about not dying, Captain. Details, Crix. Details. Jake headed for the airlock, whistling a tune while every sensor on the ship screamed warnings. Behind him, Crix clicked his mandibles in the insectoid equivalent of a heavy sigh and followed, because that's what partners did, even when those partners had the survival instincts of a particularly bold lemming. Beth's voice followed them out. Current survival probability. 3.2% and dropping. Enjoy your stay on the murder planet, gentlemen. The airlock hissed open, and Jake took a deep breath of the planet's atmosphere. Smells like victory. It smells like sulfur and regret. Crix corrected, his antennae drooping as he scanned the environment. Also, there are traces of what I can only describe as weaponized despair in the air composition. You're so dramatic. Jake hopped down onto the surface, his boots crunching on what looked like gravel but was probably the pulverized remains of previous explorers. He pulled out his datapad and started documenting. Log this. Day 1 on planet, I'm gonna name it later because I'm bad at naming things. Weather is moody, visibility is ominous. Overall vibes, solid 7 out of 10. Captain, there are 12 distinct warning markers between us and those ruins, Crix said, pointing at towering stone structures about half a kilometer away. 12. In the first 50 meters. Jake looked at the nearest marker, a tall obelisk covered in carved symbols and blinking lights. His translator displayed, "Complimentary shuttle service to ruins. Please enjoy your visit." See? They've got shuttle service. Very accommodating. Jake started walking. Captain, it says turn back or be consumed by the ancient hunger. Tomato. They passed the second marker, which featured a holographic display of aliens screaming and running. Jake's translator showed, helpful demonstration of excited tourists. Those are not excited tourists. Those are people fleeing in terror. Crix skittered sideways, trying to position himself behind Jake, while also maintaining his dignity as a Galactic Survey Corps navigator. Look at their faces. That is the universal expression for existential horror. Nah, that's just how Bleptonians smile. Trust me, I dated one once. Beth's voice crackled through their comms. Captain, I feel compelled to inform you that we have now passed through 6 separate security perimeters, each one more explicit than the last. The most recent one included a pictogram of a stick figure being torn apart by geometric shapes. Even stick figures deserve better. Geometric shapes, huh? Probably just abstract art, very trendy. Jake vaulted over a barrier that was clearly designed to keep people out. His translator rendered the text on it as, "Please mind the gap. It says beyond this point lies only madness and sorrow." Crix, buddy, you gotta get your translator checked. Mine's working fine. They approached what appeared to be a memorial wall, hundreds of plaques embedded in stone, each one featuring a name, a date, and a small picture. The wall stretched for nearly 100 meters in both directions, filled with species from across the galaxy. Some of the plaques were so old they'd started to fossilize. Jake stopped and studied the wall with genuine interest. Whoa, check it out. A hall of fame for everyone who's been here. That's actually pretty cool of them. Crix's mandibles hung open. Captain, this is a memorial. A cemetery. These are the beings who died here. Yeah, died trying to be legends. Jake snapped a selfie with the wall. Respect to the OGs. We're following in some prestigious footsteps here. They are dead footsteps. Dead. No longer living. Ceased to be. Beth, make sure you get good footage of this wall. Gonna make a great documentary someday. Jake continued toward the ruins, stepping over pressure plates that definitely triggered something mechanical beneath the surface. Beth's voice took on an almost impressed quality. Captain, you just activated 3 separate defense systems. They are currently targeting your position. Current survival probability, 2.8%. I am genuinely curious how this will play out. Defense systems? Sweet. Always wanted to test my reflexes. Jake broke into a jog as energy bolts started firing from hidden turrets. He weaved between them with the grace of someone who either had incredible Spatial awareness, or incredible luck? Probably luck. "This is not a game!" Crix shouted, scuttling after him, and somehow managing to complain while also dodging plasma fire. These automated systems were designed by civilizations that had millions of years to perfect the art of keeping people away. And yet here we are, not dead. Jake slid under a beam that would have decapitated him if he'd been 3 inches taller. Honestly, I expected more from ancient alien technology. They reached the base of the ruins, where a massive stone archway loomed overhead. Carved into every surface were warnings in languages so old they predated most current civilizations. Holographic projections showed various scenarios of doom. Energy fields crackled with menace. The ground itself seemed to pulse with a keep-away vibe. Jake's translator displayed, "Welcome Center, please sign in." "Perfect. Let's check in." Jake walked through the archway. "No, no, 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 no." Crix followed anyway, because apparently his sense of duty outweighed his sense of self-preservation. Inside the archway, they found themselves in a corridor lined with more warnings. These were even more elaborate, featuring full animated sequences of explorers meeting various creative ends. One showed someone being turned inside out. Another depicted someone being aged to dust in seconds. A third showed someone simply ceasing to exist, which honestly seemed like the merciful option. Jake's translator showed, "Informative safety videos, please watch carefully." Huh. Lot of safety regulations here. Must be OSHA compliant. Jake nodded approvingly. BF chimed in, "Captain, I have analyzed the warnings. They mention something called the Sealed One, the Forgotten Terror, and the thing we do not name because naming it gives it power. These are not encouraging descriptors." Sounds like marketing hype to me. You know how these ancient civilizations loved their dramatic titles. Jake checked his scanner, reading some big energy, signatures deeper in. Must be the good stuff. The good stuff is probably whatever killed everyone else. Crix's voice had reached a frequency that was technically classified as a weapon in some systems. They passed marker number 11, which featured a countdown timer. It was currently at 15 minutes and ticking down. Jake's translator showed, "Estimated time to attractions. See? We're almost there. 15 minutes. Jake picked up his pace. "That is a doomsday countdown. It is counting down to when the planet destroys itself to prevent whatever's here from escaping. Really specific timer for a doomsday device. Usually those are more vague." Jake shrugged. "Probably just closing time or something." They reached marker 12, the final warning. It was massive, covering the entire end of the corridor. Every species in the galaxy was represented, united in a single message, carved so deep and so urgently that whoever made it clearly wanted to make absolutely sure nobody could miss it. Jake's translator displayed, "You made it. Prize. Inside. Jackpot." Jake grinned and pushed open the massive door at the end of the corridor. Behind him, Crix made a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a prayer. "I should have been an accountant, like my clutch mother wanted." Beeth's voice carried a note of resignation. "Survival probability has now reached 1.3%. I have begun composing your obituaries. Captain Morrison, I am listing your cause of death as aggressive stupidity. Crix, yours will be accessory to aggressive stupidity." "That's fair," Crix muttered, following Jake through the door into whatever fresh horror awaited them. The door sealed shut behind them with a sound that was definitely not ominous at all, according to Jake's translator, which helpfully labeled it as automatic door for your convenience. The first thing that tried to kill them was a plant. Not just any plant, mind you. This was a plant that had clearly spent millions of years perfecting the art of botanical murder. It erupted from the ground the moment Jake stepped into the chamber beyond the door, its vines whipping out with the speed of a cracking whip and the enthusiasm of something that hadn't eaten in centuries. "Captain!" Crix dove left as a vine punched through the space where his thorax had been moments before. Jake rolled right, came up running, and laughed. "Finally, some action. I was getting bored with all that walking." "You were bored?" Crix scrambled up a pillar as 3 more vines pursued him. "We were walking through a corridor of death omens." The plant, which had to be at least 50 feet tall and counting, sprouted what could only be described as teeth. Multiple rows of them, arranged in mouths that shouldn't exist on vegetation. It screamed, which was also something plants generally didn't do, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard mixed with the death rattle of hope itself. Jake pulled out his plasma cutter and sliced through a vine. "Beth, what am I looking at here?" According to my database, that is a carnivorous devourer bloom, classified as extremely lethal, Do not approach under any circumstances, and why are you still reading this run? Beeth paused. The database entry ends with 17 exclamation marks. Neat. Jake ducked under another vine and kept moving forward. How do I kill it? You don't, you avoid it. That was the entire point of the warnings. Too late for that now. Crix leaped from his pillar to another as the plant smashed through the stone like it was cardboard. Captain, I have a suggestion. What if we went back through the door we came in? Jake tried the door. It was sealed tighter than a politician's tax records. No can do, buddy. We're committed now. I hate commitment. The plant seemed to realize it was dealing with two targets and made the executive decision to split itself down the middle, creating two smaller but equally murderous plants. Both of them coordinated their attack with the efficiency of something that had been doing this for a very long time. They hunt in packs, Jake observed, diving behind a fallen column. Smart. Smart is not the adjective I would use right now. Jake noticed that the plants seemed to be herding them toward the far end of the chamber, where an opening led deeper into the ruins. I think they want us to go that way. Maybe because that way is worse. Only one way to find out. Jake sprinted for the opening, slicing through vines as he went. His plasma cutter was starting to overheat, which was impressive given it was designed for sustained industrial use. Crix followed, screaming what were probably very sophisticated insults in his native language. They dove through the opening just as both plants lunged, smashing into each other and the doorframe with enough force to crack the ancient stone. They tumbled into the next chamber and the opening sealed behind them with a grinding sound. Okay, Jake said, breathing hard but grinning. That was fun. Fun? Fun? Crix's antennae were vibrating so fast they were blurring. Captain, my cardiac spiracles nearly gave out. That is the insectoid equivalent of a heart attack. But they didn't, so you're fine. Jake looked around the new chamber. It was massive, easily the size of a sports stadium, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. And it was moving. The entire floor was shifting, twisting, defying gravity in ways that made Jake's inner ear very upset. Beeth's voice crackled. Ah, a dimensional instability chamber. Survival probability dropping to 0.9%. I am rounding up out of politeness. What's a dimensional instability chamber? Jake asked, taking a careful step forward. His foot landed on a floor panel that immediately rotated 90 degrees, leaving him standing on what should have been a wall. It means the laws of physics in here are more like gentle suggestions. Beeth explained. Up is down. Left is inside out. Up is down. Yesterday is somehow also next Thursday. I recommend not thinking about it too hard. Too late. Jake's brain was already hurting. He took another step and found himself walking on the ceiling, except now the ceiling was the floor, and the walls were doing things walls shouldn't do. Crix, being an insectoid, was having a slightly easier time with the dimensional weirdness, though that didn't stop him from complaining. This is exactly the kind of room you build when you really, really don't want visitors. Or when you really like interior design. Jake jumped across a gap that kept changing size. He landed on a platform that existed in 3 dimensions simultaneously, which was nauseating. Gotta respect the commitment to the aesthetic. Something roared in the distance, except the distance was also somehow right next to them and also 3 miles away. A creature emerged from a wall that might have been the floor, depending on your perspective. It looked like someone had taken a bear, a squid, and a nightmare, thrown them in a blender, and given the result anger management issues. Oh good, more friends, Jake said. Those are not friends. Crix skittered up what was either a column or a really ambitious staircase. That is a dimensional predator. They eat reality itself. The creature lunged, moving through space in ways that made it impossible to track. Jake fired his plasma cutter, but the beam curved around the creature, through several dimensions, and almost hit him from behind before he ducked. Beeth, little help here? I would love to help, Captain, but my targeting systems require physics to work. Current physics status in that chamber, unclear at best. Beeth somehow managed to sound apologetic. However, I can tell you that the creature is currently existing in 7 different states simultaneously, none of which are good for you. Jake did what he did best, when faced with impossible situations. He stopped thinking and started moving on pure instinct. He ran, jumped, rolled, and somehow ended up behind the creature, which was also in front of the creature, which was also inside the creature's left ear. Dimensional instability was weird. The creature, confused by its prey suddenly existing in multiple places while also not existing at all, did what any reasonable predator would do. It ate itself. Or tried to. Or succeeded. depending on which dimension you were observing from. Either way, it disappeared in a puff of paradox. Did I just watch that thing bootstrap itself out of existence? Crix asked from his perch, which was now on the floor but also vibrating through several parallel realities. I think so. Jake spotted another opening across the chamber. Come on, let's keep moving before something else shows up. They navigated the rest of the chamber through a combination of luck, poor decision-making, and one instance where Jake simply closed his eyes and walked forward because looking at the geometry was making his nose bleed. They emerged into a corridor that, mercifully, obeyed normal physics. Jake immediately fell to his knees and kissed the ground. Never thought I'd be happy about boring old three-dimensional space, he said. We are not safe yet, Captain. Crix checked his scanner. I'm reading massive energy signatures ahead. And what appears to be, oh wonderful, localized weather systems that have achieved sentience and are filing complaints about us. Weather can't be sentient. As if to prove him wrong, a cloud formed in the corridor ahead. It had eyes, angry eyes. It looked at them, made a sound like thunder having a temper tantrum, and launched lightning bolts with what could only be described as personal malice. I stand corrected. Jake started running again. Weather can totally be sentient and it's ticked off. The storm cloud pursued them down the corridor, joined by what appeared to be a small tornado that had beef with specifically Jake, and a patch of freezing rain that seemed to be taking this whole thing personally. They chased him through 3 more chambers, each one filled with increasingly creative ways to die. There was the room full of floating razor-sharp crystals that sang songs of madness, the hallway where gravity reversed every 3 seconds, the chamber where time moved at different speeds depending on which tile you stood on, causing Jake to experience puberty again for a terrifying few seconds. Current survival, probability, 0.4%. Eth announced cheerfully. I have now moved beyond writing obituaries, and have started planning your memorial services. Captain, I'm thinking open bar. You'd want an open bar. That's actually pretty thoughtful, Eth. Crix, I'm thinking jazz funeral. Very classy. I'm not dead yet. They burst through a final doorway and found themselves in front of a temple. A massive, imposing, absolutely covered in warnings, temple. The walls around it featured every language in the galaxy, spelling out the same message in increasingly urgent terms. Jake pulled out his translator and squinted at the nearest warning. It displayed, employee entrance, please use side door. Well, looks like we're supposed to go in. Jake headed for the massive front door. Crix collapsed on the ground, his 6 legs sprawled out in exhaustion. Captain, please. I am begging you. Look at these warnings. Use your eyes. Your human eyes that your species spent millions of years evolving specifically to read symbols and recognize danger. Jake looked. He really looked at the warnings this time. His translator still showed employee entrance, but there was something off about it. A glitching quality. He smacked the side of his datapad a few times. The text flickered. For just a moment, he saw what it really said. Do not open. Sealed for the good of all life. Seriously. We mean it this time. Then it flickered back to employee entrance. Huh, Jake said. I think my translator might actually be busted. You think? Crix's voice broke several octaves. Oh well. Jake shrugged. We've come this far. Be ashamed to turn back now. He pushed open the temple doors, which swung inward with a sound like the universe sighing in defeat. The temple interior was surprisingly well lit, which Jake found suspicious. Ancient forbidden temples were supposed to be dark and spooky, not illuminated like a corporate office building. Glowing crystals lined the walls, providing cheerful lighting that completely contradicted the atmosphere of doom everyone kept insisting on. This is nice, Jake said, his voice echoing. Very welcoming. Welcoming? Crix had given up on volume control entirely. Captain, there is a literal moat of something bubbling around the central platform. I am scanning it now. It is scanning back. The moat is sentient and judging us. Everyone's a critic. Jake studied the room's layout. The central platform sat in the middle of the bubbling moat, accessible only by a narrow bridge that looked like it was held together by spite and expired warranty. On the platform stood a massive door, and this door made all the previous warnings look like friendly suggestions. This door was covered in chains, energy shields, runes that actually hurt to look at, holograms of people screaming, a countdown timer, several biohazard symbols. What appeared to be a very angry sticky note in at least 40 languages. Jake pulled out his translator for the sticky note. It read, "Break room, please clean up after yourself." They're really concerned about cleanliness here. Jake observed. Beth's voice cut in, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely concerned. Captain, I need you to listen very carefully. My sensors are detecting something behind that door. Something with an energy signature that matches known descriptions of entities classified as civilization enders. Civilization enders? That's a job title? It is a warning category. The highest warning category. Beth's digital voice actually cracked. Captain, the energy reading suggests whatever is behind that door has been imprisoned for approximately 50,000 years. Every species in the galactic record contributed to keeping it locked. This is not a treasure vault. This is a prison. Jake crossed his arms and studied the door more carefully. The chains were definitely overkill for a simple lock. And the energy shields had that particular hum of something designed by committee across multiple species. Okay. So what's locked in there? According to the temple's databanks, which I am now accessing, it is called Gorthok the Devourer, Gorthok the Inevitable, Gorthok the End of All Things. Beth paused. Also listed as Gorthok the Irritated, which seems out of place with the others. Maybe he's cranky from being locked up for 50,000 years, Jake suggested. Maybe we should leave him locked up. Crix had positioned himself behind a pillar, peeking out nervously. Captain, this is the thing. The thing all the warnings were about. The reason the planet tries to kill visitors. The entire Forbidden Zone exists to keep people away from this door. Jake walked closer to the door, carefully crossing the narrow bridge. The sentient mote bubbled disapprovingly at him. Hey, if this Gorthok guy is such a threat, why go through all this trouble? Why not just destroy him? The temple records indicate they tried, Beth said. 17 different methods of execution. He survived them all. Imprisonment was the only option. Huh. Jake reached the platform and stood in front of the door. Up close, he could see that the chains weren't just physical. They were wrapped in layers of technology and magic, and probably some stuff that didn't have names yet. So, what did he do to deserve this? Content to senses. Scanning the historical records now. Beth went quiet for a moment. That's odd. What's odd? The actual crimes are remarkably vague. Threatened the social order, disturbed the peace, refused to comply with cosmic regulations, made others uncomfortable with his presence. Beth sounded confused. Captain, these charges are, frankly, pretty weak for a civilization ender. Crix scuttled onto the bridge, curiosity apparently overcoming his survival instinct. Let me see those records. He pulled up his own datapad and scrolled through the information. His antennae twitched in what Jake had learned was confusion. This doesn't make sense. The charges against this Gorthok entity read less like a criminal record and more like, I don't know, complaints from a homeowners association. Maybe they got the wrong guy, Jake said. You don't accidentally imprison someone for 50,000 years. A voice rumbled from behind the door, deep, resonant, and extremely annoyed. Finally, someone with basic reasoning skills. All three of them jumped. Jake's hand went to his plasma cutter. Crix made a sound like a tea kettle having an anxiety attack. BEH sensors went haywire. Did the door just talk? Jake asked. I'm not the door, you idiot. I'm behind the door. I'm Gorthok, the Irritated. The voice sighed. A sound like mountains settling. Sad. And I've been listening to you three bumble around my prison for the last 20 minutes. Do you have any idea how boring 50,000 years is? Your terrible decision-making has been the most entertainment I've had in millennia. Jake approached the door cautiously. So, you're the big bad civilization ender everyone's terrified of? That's what they wrote on the paperwork, yes. Gorthok sounded tired. Want to know what I actually did? Sure. I told jokes, dad jokes, specifically, really bad ones. There was a pause. Why did the Zortonian cross the nebula? To get to the other side. What do you call a Krell without honor? A Krell in all. How many Bleptonians does it take to change a quantum stabilizer? 3, but they all exist in different states simultaneously, so technically it's both 3 and not 3. Silence filled the temple. That's it? Crix said slowly. You're imprisoned for 50,000 years because of bad puns? The previous civilizations had very strict laws about humor. They believed jokes created disorder in the cosmic consciousness, made people think instead of blindly following authority, so they rounded up everyone with a sense of humor and locked us away. I'm the last one left, Gorthok's voice turned bitter. 50,000 years in here because I made a Galactic Council member groan during a speech. Jake looked at the chains, the shields, the apocalyptic warning signs. This seems excessive for dad jokes. Thank you, that's what I've been saying. Gorthok actually sounded relieved. But no, they had to go full dramatic protocol. Civilization Ender classifications, prophecies of doom, the works. You know why? Why? Because admitting they locked someone up for making them laugh would make them look petty. So they invented this whole narrative about me being a cosmic threat. Easier to justify the tyranny that way. BF's voice was thoughtful. Captain, I'm cross-referencing the historical records with known propaganda patterns. Gorthok's story is checking out. The charges are exactly the kind of vague accusations authoritarian regimes use to eliminate dissent. Crix was scrolling frantically through his datapad. Oh my stars. Captain, look at this. The Galactic Council that imprisoned Gorthok was overthrown 3,000 years later for, and I quote, excessive bureaucracy and having no sense of humor. So, let me get this straight, Jake said, rubbing his temples. All those warnings, all those defenses, all those species going extinct trying to get here, was to protect a prison built by a corrupt government to lock up a guy who told bad jokes? Pretty much, Gorthok confirmed. Though to be fair, some of those species were trying to free me. The Zorthanians got really close, actually. Nice people. Couldn't navigate dimensional instabilities worth a damn, but their hearts were in the right place. Jake looked at Crix. Crix looked at Jake. They both looked at the door covered in apocalyptic warnings. Your translator wasn't broken, was it? Crix said quietly. Nope, Jake admitted. I just have a policy. If someone tells me I absolutely can't do something, I immediately want to know why. Authority figures tend to lie about threats to keep people in line. Figured worst case, I'd find actual danger and we'd deal with it. Best case, I'd find some authoritarian nonsense that needed exposing. You risked our lives on a hunch? A well-educated hunch. Jake turned back to the door. So, Gorthok. Want to get out of there? More than anything. But I should warn you. If you open this door, the temple's going to self-destruct. They built in a failsafe. Can't have the truth getting out. How long do we have? Oh, about 3 minutes from when you break the first seal. Jake cracked his knuckles. Heh. Beeth. Plot us the fastest route back to the ship. Already done, Captain. Though I'm obligated to point out that freeing a cosmically imprisoned entity is definitely against protocol. Yeah. Well, protocol also said to stay away from this planet. And look how well that worked out. Jake grabbed the first chain. Crix. You with me? The insectoid stood there for a long moment, his antennae twitching. Then he sighed, a sound like air escaping from a particularly exasperated tire. I'm going to regret this. Probably. My clutch mother is going to kill me. If we survive, too sure. The council is going to have us arrested. Wouldn't be the first time. Crix moved to help with the chains. Why do I stay friends with you? Because life's boring without a little chaos, Jake said, grinning. They pulled. The first chain broke. An alarm immediately started blaring, and a computerized voice announced, self-destruct sequence initiated. 3 minutes to total annihilation. Please exit the temple in an orderly fashion. Thank you for visiting. Well, Gorthok said from behind the door, this should be interesting. The chains came off faster than Jake expected, mostly because Gorthok was helping from the inside, which made the whole process feel less like a prison break and more like opening a really stubborn pickle jar. The energy shields fizzled out with anticlimactic pops, and the door swung open just as the temple's self-destruct countdown hit 2 minutes. Jake wasn't sure what he'd been expecting. Something massive and terrifying, probably. Teeth and tentacles and cosmic horror made manifest. What he got was a being that looked like someone had taken the concept of a grumpy middle-aged dad and projected it into higher dimensions. Gorthok had the general shape of humanoid, if you squinted and ignored the fact that he was semi-transparent and glowing faintly purple. Finally. Gorthok stretched, his form flickering through several states of matter simultaneously. You have no idea how cramped it gets in there. I've had a crick in my neck for 12,000 years. No time for stretching. Crix was already running for the exit. Temple exploding. Right, yes, the self-destruct. Gorthok looked around his former prison with disdain. Dramatic to the end, those old council members were. Come on, I know a shortcut. There's a shortcut? Jake sprinted after Crix, with Gorthok floating alongside effortlessly. We spent an hour getting here. That's because you came in the front way. The way specifically designed to kill you. Gorthok gestured and a wall simply stopped existing, revealing a straight corridor back toward the entrance. Employee exit. Much faster. That would have been helpful earlier. They ran through the corridor as not Rose saying. They contented it, the temple began shaking itself apart. The countdown voice kept announcing the time remaining with the cheerful tone of someone who wasn't about to be vaporized. Behind them, the moat of sentient liquid was evacuating itself, apparently having no interest in dying for architectural integrity. So, Gorthok said, casually floating along while Jake and Crix ran for their lives. You're Captain Jake Morrison. Your reputation precedes you. You know me? Jake vaulted over a collapsing pillar. I've been cosmically imprisoned, not dead. I can still sense things. You've gotten yourself banned from 14 star systems, caused 3 diplomatic incidents, and somehow accidentally solved a civil war by breaking both sides' sacred artifacts. Gorthok sounded impressed. You're either brilliant or the luckiest idiot in the galaxy. I prefer lucky idiot. Less pressure. They burst out of the temple just as the countdown hit 10 seconds. The sentient weather systems from earlier had apparently decided this was no longer their problem and had evacuated the area. Even the carnivorous plants had uprooted themselves and were shambling away at top speed. Ship, get to the ship. Crix was moving faster than Jake had ever seen him move. Beeth had helpfully started the engines remotely. The questionable decision's boarding ramp was already down, landing lights on. They dove through the airlock with seconds to spare. Beth, go, go, go! Jake slammed the door control. The ship lifted off just as the temple exploded behind them. Except it wasn't really an explosion so much as an implosion that turned into a dimensional collapse that briefly created a small black hole that immediately evaporated while somehow also never existing in the first place. The whole planet shuddered, decided this was above its pay grade, and the defense systems all shut down in what could only be described as cosmic resignation. Gorthok materialized in the ship's common area, looking around with interest. Nice. Ship. Questionable decision? That's actually pretty good. Thanks. Jake collapsed into his pilot chair. B. Death status? All systems nominal. We are clear of the planet's gravity well. Current survival probability has returned to acceptable levels, which is shocking given the last hour of my existence. Beeth paused. Also, we now have an ancient cosmic entity on board. My insurance premiums are going to be astronomical. Crix was lying on the floor, his 6 legs splayed out, breathing heavily. I survived. I actually survived. My clutch mother is going to be so disappointed I didn't learn my lesson. Jake turned to face Gorthok, who was examining the ship's coffee maker with fascination. So, what now? You're free. What does a cosmically powerful entity do after 50,000 years of imprisonment? Gorthok pressed the button on the coffee maker and watched it brew with childlike delight. Honestly? I have no idea. The galaxy's completely different now. New species, new governments, new problems. He took a sip of coffee and his eyes lit up. Oh wow, you people invented this? This is amazing. It's just coffee. It's caffeinated liquid energy. This would have been banned in my era for being too much fun. Gorthok made himself another cup. You know what? I think I want to try stand-up comedy. Real comedy. Not just dad jokes. Though those are still great. Why did the Krell cross the road? Because the road was actually a predetermined path of honor and they had no choice. Silence. See? Still got it. Gorthok looked pleased with himself. That joke is why you were imprisoned for 50 millennia, Crix said from the floor. Their loss. Gorthok settled into a chair, phasing through it slightly before correcting himself to actually sit properly. So, Captain Morrison, what's your plan? Because I'm guessing freeing a cosmically imprisoned entity is going to have some consequences. Jake pulled up the ship's communicator. Already, there were 17 urgent messages from the Galactic Council, 43 news alerts, and 1 message from his insurance company canceling his policy. Yeah, probably gonna have to explain this one. The Council's going to arrest us, Crix said, still on the floor. We're going to space prison. I'm going to space prison because my captain can't read warning signs. In my defense, the warning signs were technically lying, Jake pointed out. They really were, Gorthok agreed. Civilization ender? Please. I'm barely a civilization inconveniencer. He took another sip of coffee. Though I suppose we could prove it. I could do a comedy show. If I don't destroy civilization, then the warnings were clearly propaganda, and the council has to answer for maintaining an unjust imprisonment. Beeth's voice took on an intrigued tone. That is actually legally sound logic. The burden of proof would shift to them. Wait, you're serious? Jake looked at Gorthok. You want to do stand-up comedy as legal defense? Why not? I've got 50,000 years of material built up. And honestly, if my jokes don't end civilization, it proves the whole thing was authoritarian nonsense. Gorthok's eyes gleamed. Plus, it would be really funny to watch the council try to explain why they spent so many resources on keeping jokes locked away. Crix finally sat up. This is insane. This is the most insane plan I've ever heard, and I've heard the captain's plans. I like it, Jake said, grinning. Beeth. Set course for the nearest major space station. We're going to need a venue. Captain, they will try to arrest us on sight. Then we'll make sure there are cameras. Hard to arrest someone for freeing a prisoner when that prisoner is just telling jokes to a crowd. Jake was already planning. We'll call it the Forbidden Comedy Tour. Make it a whole thing. This is either brilliant or the worst idea in galactic history, Crick said. Why not both? Gorthok raised his coffee cup in a toast. To bad decisions and worse. Jokes. Jake clinked his own cup against Gorthok's semi-corporeal one. I'll drink to that. Behind them, the planet they'd just escaped from was already being quarantined again by automated systems, all the warning beacons reactivating. But this time, there was nothing to warn about. The prison was empty. The threat was drinking coffee in the common room of a ship called Questionable Decision, and working on his Tight 5 for open mic night. Beeth's voice cut through the celebration. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. They sound upset. Let it go to voicemail, Jake said. We don't have voicemail. Then I guess they'll have to wait. Jake kicked his feet up on the console. Crix, remind me to get your translator checked when we dock. Clearly mine was working perfectly this whole time. I hate you so much right now. No, you don't. No, I don't. Crix admitted. But I'm going to complain about it extensively. That's the spirit. Jake looked at Gorthok. So, got any good opening jokes for your first show? Gorthok thought for a moment. How about this? A human, an insectoid, and an ancient cosmic entity walk into a forbidden planet. The planet says, don't come in. The human says, hold my beer. He paused. Too meta? Perfect, Jake said, laughing. The ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a planet full of warnings that had turned out to be one very long lie, and heading toward whatever chaos awaited them at the next station. In the cargo hold, something that had hitched a ride from the planet started making concerning noises, but that was a problem for future them. Right now, they had a comedy tour to plan.